Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of She Plays Games. I'm your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I'm talking with Jean Leggett. Jean is the CEO of One More Story Games, and in this position, she acts as a speaker, mentor, educator, and coach. After her husband Blair's near-death experience, the couple decided to create their own game engine in an effort to bridge the gap between reading books and playing video games. I really hope you enjoy Jean's story, and if you like what I do and want me to continue, please remember to subscribe to She Plays Games so that you never miss an episode. This is episode 8 of She Plays Games. Hi, Jean. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm pretty pumped to be here.
So we connected originally on Twitter, and we thought it would be great to have you on the show to highlight how diverse the scope of the industry is and be able to talk about like the opportunities that are out there for people, especially entrepreneurs like yourself.
Yes, I have absolutely loved Twitter as a tool for game dev and growing community. And I'm really glad to have met you because I think the work that you're doing on this podcast is really important.
Oh, thank you so much. And I really, really, really greatly appreciate that because it's a struggle out there and we need to get our voices heard more.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest challenges is we just all would love to be able to do the work that we do it well and with passion, but we also have to hustle and self-promote and that takes a lot out of you, especially when you're not sure if there's the reward. But I think you would probably agree with me that the reward is in the journey and maybe hopefully in the destination as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the moment, you are the CEO of a company called One More Story Games, which is just incredible because not only are you the CEO of the company, but you and your husband have created a game engine, which is that's just amazing.
Thank you. Well, if you would like to hear a little bit how we got started, one of the things that I like to share with people is my unusual trajectory into the game space because I have an English degree and I was trained as a life coach and stand-up comedian. Which is, I love telling people, it's like, yeah, I used to be a stand-up comic and now I run a games company. And I think that why I do that is for two reasons. One is women are often underestimated anyways. So I like to throw the bar down low so then I can just like knock them with the 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
Because they're not expecting, this articulate woman to talk about the games industry and why it's important to amplify women's stories and women's voices and women's talent. So, we started the company in 2013. Shortly after my husband had a near-death experience. So he's actually the one with the more traditional games experience. He worked at Electronic Arts. He worked at Zynga. And we were at Zynga Dallas when he was misdiagnosed or misprescribed a medication and it nearly killed him.
Oh my God.
So we thought, it was a very surreal time. And we were living in this strange city in a strange country where, most people think Americans and Canadians are very alike, but we had some deep philosophical differences and we just felt like aliens in that country. So we came back home to his hometown where he hadn't lived in 20 years. And he said, I want to do this thing. I want to build this game engine because I know so many great writers that don't have the tech skills to make story-based games. And I said, great, why don't you go do that? I'm going to do laughter yoga, stand-up comedy, and mindfulness workshops. And we'll see where we are in a year from there. And about a year in, he had started with the basic prototype and we had gotten some students on board to help him code the beginning phases of the engine. And we just kept at it. And I joined when it made more sense. I figured I could help him raise money. So he's the hacker, I'm the hustler. which is why
Yeah.
you have me on the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's been, it's been a journey. We have had a lot of learning. And man, do I ever wish that I knew then what I know now, right? And I think every entrepreneur feels that way.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
we've taken our engine into private camps. We've taught kids as young as like 7.5 how to use the game engine. We're working with the #1 New York Times bestseller right now with a very special and I think hopefully a formative and formidable piece of game history. I don't know, maybe I'm putting too much into it, but yeah, we're always thinking about how we can leave the games industry a better place and the world a better place. All that with a game engine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the thing with your engine, because with your engine, if listeners want to be sort of more informed about it, it's that it's essentially bringing books into games. Like, it's incredible. I mean, and one of the things that has been really lacking recently with many games is story. Like, there's a lot of games out there that have this sort of cookie cutter storyline that everybody gets bored of, or it's just too convoluted that it just doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
for you guys to come in and just present an author's work that is already solid and just needs that little bit of like interactiveness to just make it a game, it's amazing. Yeah. Like I think it's incredible.
Thank you. There's a unique joy, and sometimes we've taken our demos to public libraries. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's an age around puberty for which boys in particular become very reluctant to show up in class. I think there's an age at which children become very vulnerable and sensitive to being judged by other students. And it comes around this reluctant reading thing too, right? Because when they're asked to read out loud, they become very nervous and self-conscious. But I remember watching this 10-year-old boy play one of our games called Hard Vacuum Lullaby, which is like a half-hour space adventure. He didn't notice that every single character was a woman. And it's like, it doesn't matter, right? It's
No.
like, I'm reading this cool space game and it's a book, but it's a game. How cool is this? And it was just such a pleasure to watch this kid play from the beginning to the end, not look up once to ask for help. And you can't get through our reading games without reading comprehension skills. So it's immensely satisfying. And, I have often said that what we're trying to do really is re-engineer literacy through games, because that's the world that we live in right now. We live in this world where, listen, I still buy books. I still purchase books on my e-reader, and I also listen to books on audio, right? Like I love words. But I also think that we live in a space where the way that kids are being raised these days is they want a little bit something more. They want agency in the stories that they're consuming. And it doesn't have to be, these short story-based games that are out there. It can be something that's meatier. That's why we have bookmeetsgame.com redirects to us, because I thought that is the most simplistic way to describe what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I mean, I still struggle with reading. Like I wish I was a better reader. I mean, when I was in school, and even now, I much prefer putting on a movie and watching a movie or just playing a game than reading a book, because I do struggle significantly with reading comprehension. But if I had this when I was growing up, it would have been amazing. And I think boys in particular struggle in school, don't they, with regards to just school life. Like I think it's really hard for boys to get through school, isn't it? Because it's more geared, at least over here in the UK, like with testing and stuff, people have found that it's actually geared more towards girls rather than boys, who they do need that more active mind type learning, don't they?
I think I don't know the specifics in terms of what percentage of children struggle in schools. I think that the current way that we're teaching isn't working. And what I've seen, we've done these summer camps a couple of times now for 2 years. We're going to be doing summer camps again this year for the first time in 3 years. And we're quite excited about it. The one thing that I found remarkable is we would have educators and parents come in and say, what have you done to my child? Like they'll come in on the second day and they'll be so surprised by the level of engagement that their child has. And I will tell you that like on the Friday of the last day of camp, they'll all say, man, this was harder than anything I ever did in school, but it was also the most fun. And I think that has to do, like these kids are still learning how to write and communicate and do their logic skills. And they also code in Lewis script, and they are doing the whole thing when they're creating their own games. But there's that sense of ownership and agency in the creation of the story. And so I think that we need to find a way to meet people where they're at. I used to be, I used to have very set opinions, and sometimes I still have set opinions. But, recently, I think it was about 6 months ago, somebody had said, hey, you know what? There are a lot of people who struggle with low literacy skills. Right? They may have graduated high school, but maybe their reading level where they're most comfortable is at grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. And in fact, most newspapers around the world are geared towards the grade 5 reading level. And I used to think, well, our games are for literature. and you know what? There's room for everything. Right? There's room for games that are highbrow, lowbrow, in between. Like, who cares? As long as there's something meaningful to it. So hopefully by creating this technology and making it available to authors, that the key thing that we're most focused on is getting stories out there that we normally wouldn't hear about, right? It's, we've been fortunate enough to travel throughout the world, and I remember very specifically, we spoke to a man local to us, which was hilarious. This was an elderly man who said, listen, could I maybe create a story with you about surviving the London Blitz? Right? And could I create a game with you? And I had somebody say to me, listen, I'm doing a documentary on Japanese internment camps. Could I create a game with you? And that's where I come to this piece of what we're trying to do is interactive digital media. Video games has a very set idea about what that is. And this is interactive digital media. So it's a story that we're telling in an interactive format. And there are such incredible stories out there just waiting to be told. And I think that's one of the things that really excites me about where we are in the indie space right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, so to help you build out the company, you guys had to seek out external investment. Was that something that you did right off the bat, or did it come later? And like, how scary was it to sort of be like, hi, we need money, please?
Yeah. Well, when Blair and I first started, we had pretty much been debt-free. Like, we'd paid off our student loans. We don't have any children. We don't have a mortgage. And we were at the point where we were willing to take on a substantial amount of financial risk because we know that we're highly employable. And, worst case scenario, it's not that much money to repay. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to weigh your risk factors. And a lot of people are very risk averse. So we started off with investing our own money into the company. We did not pay ourselves, and we didn't pay ourselves for quite a long time. And I had a friend whose father had passed away, and she said, listen, I have a little bit of money. You guys look like you're doing something interesting. Could I invest? So that was the first external investor. And we thought we had a line of credit to, extend that initial investment, which was no longer available to us. So we did a friends and family letter. And we wrote everything out like a micro business plan to basically say, listen, here's the vision of this thing that we're trying to build. Here's why the games industry would benefit from what it is that we're doing. And here's a projected timeline of when we think that, this thing is going to really hit the ground running. Right. And also at the time, my husband and I had been together for 17 years. So most of the people who we tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, would you like to invest? These were people that we knew for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And they knew us.
Yeah, they trusted you.
they trusted that we had the skills and the knowledge, both technically, but also from the hustle side. So they trusted the hacker and the hustler that we were going to be able to do this. And so over the course of the 6 years that we're coming up on our anniversary, we have
congrats.
raised, thank you. We have raised over $500,000 Canadian. And oftentimes people go, wow, that's a lot. I'm like, it's not a lot because we've had teammates, right? We've had other people that we've had to pay. This is not $500,000 coming into our pockets. Man, if the two of us stayed employed, we would have made $1 million by now, right?
Yeah.
We've given up a lot financially to be able to build this game engine because we know that the 10-year vision, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs go into the business thinking about the 2, the 3, maybe the 5-year vision. It's like, we're in the 10-year vision, right? This is something bigger. This is something that we're willing to make the sacrifices for. And there's something magical about the work that we do that has people say, I want to be a part of that. Like I'll sit on an airplane and have a 5-hour chat with somebody. And at the other end, they will drive 2.5 hours to take us out to dinner because they want to invest.
That's so cool.
I don't know. I'm not a stranger to talking to people. I love talking to people. I love what we do. And I think it just, I
think that must be a thing that, like, I mean, you say about entrepreneurship and then like, it's always hard to sort of keep yourself from getting burnt out, but you guys have such a solid vision of what you want for this and what it could potentially be. That must be such a good motivation to keep you guys going.
It is like we're both on the same page, which is really fantastic. We've been through this whole thing together. We've gone through betrayal, sabotage, blackmail. We've been blackmailed by one of our consultants, and we've had some challenges, some threats to our marriage along the way. And it's been a surreal journey, but we're in this together. This has been the hardest year of our company because we had a huge gap in our funding because we had, taken on this project that we're working on, and we had some investors short us on funding, which led to a significant issue. And we didn't have jobs because this is what we do for full-time work. And so actually we were homeless for 2 months this year.
Were you? Oh,
we
goodness.
were. And, because I have done the work to build relationships so strongly over the last 5 years, I was able to turn to my network and not tell them that we were homeless. I was just like, listen, we're going to go on an adventure and we're going to travel all through Eastern Canada and then like travel across Canada. And we're just going to do a documentary, and it's going to be #StoryC2C. And we actually did speaking opportunities in Boston, in Northern New Brunswick, in Ottawa, in Toronto. Like, we turned this into a marketing tour and to sort of cover up the thing that we were homeless. And at the same time, I was dealing with my dad's cancer diagnosis and then his eventual passing. Yeah. So it was a really horrible year. And you know what? These things happen. And I like talking about it because I want entrepreneurs often feel isolated and alone. They often think that what's happening to them, including maybe some relationship or marital difficulties, that they are alone. They're not alone. There are people out there that have been through the exact same thing that they have. They have, other people have gone through financial difficulties. I know tons of founders that are struggling. And so it has been hard because you're trying to balance between I should be working and I should be productive. And I also need to manage my self-care and my mental health. So that it's still a challenge, but we're getting back into the swing of things where we've both got some part-time work that we absolutely love. We're teaching at Canada's top game design program, and it's a real joy. And it's, I think, refreshed our energy for doing the work at One More Story Games.
Yeah, to reach that level and then have to bounce back from that is really, really, really impressive.
Thank you.
And to further that with Canada, I mean, my husband years ago, we're talking about probably almost 9 years ago or so, actually entered a business competition in Ontario. And it really seems like their games development was eerily popular. Like it was just something that was like buzzing in the area. And I wondered if the scene was similar in Barrie.
Well, we lived in Barrie for 7 years. We left Barrie in May, and we were the only game development studio there, and we
Which
really
is so weird.
struggled. You know, it's an hour. It's 80 kilometers north of Toronto, so like an hour, 2 hours in bad traffic, and it was challenging, to be honest. You know, I considered a lot of the people in the local government to be decent acquaintances, friends, what have you. But they struggled because I think we were just too far ahead of where they were looking for their technology initiatives at the time, right? So it was constantly us trying to educate them that, you know, video games are not for children. Like the average age of a gamer is 36 years old, and women over 50 are the fastest growing demographic. Like this is not about making some whimsical thing for a 5-year-old. Games is such a broad market. And we've already seen collectively the impact of like one game can change a country's economy. We've seen that happen with The Witcher in Poland. Like we went to speak, I was invited to speak last year at Poland, Poznan GIC, and I met tons of Eastern Europeans, and the Polish government is throwing money into games accelerators because they understand that a games economy can transform their entire country. And look at the success of Fortnite in Australia, right? That brought in $1 billion into the Australian economy from one game. So I'd very much like to see that happen more here. We have successfully received some smaller grants. There was like a travel assistance grant that we got. We did get a pre-production grant for the sequel to this game, but we were so far behind on this one that we had to turn it down. But it was really nice to be validated in that way. Like they finally saw that we were worthy of getting this grant. It's just the timing didn't work out. And we wanted to make sure that it could go to another company that could use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when people think about like getting into games in general, it's often with the focus of like making them. And obviously you guys, your focus was to enable people to make games who perhaps don't think they had the skills to do so. Why was that such an important focus for you?
I think for Blair, it was the focus. He had spent, you know, these 11 plus years at EA and Zynga, and he'd seen how these games that are designed to sort of predicate on your slot machine dopamine receptor mechanics, you know, that's a whole other conversation and tangent. But we both have English degrees. Blair also has a philosophy degree and a political theory degree and a computing science degree. And so here's this guy that's uniquely qualified to be able to build a tool for world builders and storytellers. And we know so many people that are really big into RPGs, Blair is included. And he just thought, you know what, I can take an RPG, break it down into its most basic elements and make this easy enough. And in fact, that's how we got started doing the summer camps. In summer of 2014, we were just maybe 6 months into development. And I said to him, you watch, next year, we're going to rent the office across the hall, and we're going to have parents pay us for their children to bug test our software, and we will call it summer camp.
Boom.
And so that's how the first summer camp was born. And then it just rolled on. And I do this whole TEDx talk, and I share the experience because, you know, 10-year-olds are brutally honest when something doesn't work.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And we found that we had some issues, and that first summer was a lot of hot fixes that first week. And then, you know, just building on these features that these kids wanted to put into the engine. It's like, okay, let's go. So by the end of that summer, we're like, no, thanks. And then the next summer, you know, early in the year, are you guys doing camps again? I'm like, oh, no, never again. Thank you. No. And one of our colleagues said, well, what do you need? And I said, well, we downsized. We can't possibly do camps. Oh, we'll give you space for 2 months. I'm like, oh, crap. So we had the space. And I was like, that's my first official sponsor. Why don't I activate my network and see if I can't find more sponsorship? So PayPal came on board. Shopify came on board. And we were able to get, like, first year, 3 girls, 17 boys. Second year, we had 20 and 20.
Wow.
Right. And like, those girls still email us 3 years later and say, you guys changed my life. I'm coding.
That's so cool.
You know, so I don't know. I want to make it possible for all writers who are interested in creating games. And I honestly think that doing the work in the summer camps has fundamentally changed who we are as game developers. Like, I don't think we could ever not teach in our communities and to kids. It's they're the future. You know, if you see something in which your story is represented, it moves you.
Absolutely.
It moves you.
For some reason, I keep getting like flashes in my head about Big with Tom Hanks and just how like he was like the sort of head of the company, like head of the vision for the company, because he was a kid. And it's, as you say, kids are brutally honest, and kids have expectations about how they imagine things to work. Whereas as adults, we sort of lose that confidence and we lose bits of that creativity that kids just have. They just have naturally.
I don't even think it's necessarily the creativity part, although studies have shown that by the time we're, I want to say 5 or 8 years old, when I gave my TEDx talk, I had that down pat. It's been a couple of years. And
it's filed away. It's
filed away. I fragged that.
Had to fit in something else.
I had to fit something else in, but I think the number one thing that differentiates us from people that are slightly shorter than us and less experienced is we start to lose our curiosity.
Mm.
And my favorite people, meeting my favorite kind of people out in the wild, are curious people who understand that the knowledge that they have is a growing and evolving thing versus people that are very stagnant and fixed. Right? I remember so many times talking to, important men in games, and how they said, well, I don't see why anybody would enjoy playing a reading game. I don't see why anybody would like to play games that have photographs in them versus deep hand-drawn animations. Like, we're looking at the resurgence of indie games and 8-bit characters.
Yeah.
Right? Like, game art and game play and game everything is so wide and varied. And it's a real shame that there are people that are so closed off because they have such a fixed idea of what sells.
Yeah, and that's what it all comes down to. It's like their idea of what is selling, but they don't actually know. Like they don't. No. They have a figment. They have a tiny little bit of that knowledge of what would actually sell, but they don't actually know. Like you see so many times where these companies they can't make lightning strike twice because they just had that one idea that really worked, that one idea that really, really worked. And then they can't do it again because they get too focused on, well, we made a lot of money with that one, so we're going to try and make a lot of money again. And then it's just kind of like, well, you can't do that.
You can't, well, exactly, because what if it was like that specific moment in time, right? What if it had nothing to do with your game, but just the spark hit at that exact moment in time?
All the planets aligned.
All the planets aligned. And, we've been working on this one project for 2.5 years. And, I feel a sense of business person and developer shame for having taken so long with this project. We've had a lot of challenges in it. And when I first took Charlene a demo of it in May of 2018, I flew down to Texas. I went to her house. We had a little slumber party, and, I showed her the game, and I knew getting on that plane, I had nothing to do with the game at that point except to raise the money to make it. And I was not happy with what I had played. And here I was having to do this anyways. And she said she wasn't happy. And I'm like, I will personally go and take care of this. And so I've been rewriting the game. and I haven't touched it in a while because of major life issues this year.
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges of being a small studio, right? It's there are always going to be you're juggling your productivity with your public persona, with all of these things. But I'm so excited for working on this project, for what this project is going to mean. I don't know if it was one of your questions, but I'm going to answer it anyways. It's think of it as like a mature Nancy Drew. So it centers on the character of Lily Bard, and it's actually part of Charlene's 5-book series where Lily has moved to a small town called Shakespeare. And she takes on a very nondescript job because she was abducted and assaulted and mutilated 4 years prior. And so she's still trying to process that grief by avoiding it. And what we've done in the adaptation is we've given players agency where it's still a murder mystery. There's still lots of goofy, fun stuff in there. Like, I don't want it to be super dark, but she is dealing with her PTSD. She is dealing with her anxiety and her trauma in a way that the book never did. So, and I've been fortunate to speak about that in Germany and Poland and Australia, and just share why it's so important to have mature game content done in an ethical and responsible way, right? These are stories that we need to hear because sexual assault is very prevalent. And if women understood that they aren't alone, and that, you know, like it goes on and on and on. I think at the end of the day, what we all crave is being heard, understood, and acknowledged. As the Marines say, hooah. That's where that comes from. And, you know, I just take it to that personal level is I hear you, I understand you, and I acknowledge you. And I think that's what makes games and our engine an exciting platform to be creating at this time.
Absolutely. And like you know, honestly, not being a reader myself, I only really knew Charlene Harris from True Blood. So like to know that she actually did this whole another series, it's really cool. And I did play a bit of the body found at Shakespeare's Park. And the thing that I found the most fascinating about it was the fact that it incorporated the other senses as well, because you have like these bits where she's getting scared and her heart is beating and her breathing's getting more, and you just don't get that from a book. Like, I'm sorry, like you don't get those senses tingled as well as you do when you're either maybe watching a movie or you're playing a book in this sort of context. Like it's really, really fascinating that I'm reading the story and I'm actually like also getting satisfied because I'm just like, oh my God, wait, I don't want to touch this dead body because I don't know if I want to do. And then I was even debating my choices as well, which is the other beauty of the thing, is that there's choices that you can still make in the stories as well. Whereas like so like the bit in the very beginning where you go to touch the body, I immediately after I touched the body was just like, crap, I touched it and there's fingerprints everywhere. And what, did I just screw up the whole game? Did I just screw up the whole book? Like, what's going to happen? And then when I got to the home and I was just like, all right, I got to call up the police. And I was like, did I say the right thing to the police? And yeah, no, it was really good.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you liked it. And, you know, it's, you did nothing wrong. It's like that's actually one of the reasons why it took so long to do that, because the demo lasts anywhere from half an hour to an hour, right? It's, my goal is to finish writing it by the end of February so that we can get it out. We need to take our platform to the next evolution and get out of Flash. Like, we've been stuck in Flash for 6 years. We haven't had the resources to move us out, but I want to finish the game. It's really important to me, but I'm having so much fun. Like, I don't know if you are one of those people that likes to hover over things.
Yes. It was really exciting, actually. Yeah, because you can hover over like pretty much all of the items and like have a little tidbit of information. And sometimes it's like sassy, and I'm just like, all right, that's good.
There is so much sass. There's so much sass. Like, I love puns. So like in her bedroom, if you hover over her window, it's like back in the USS Yard, which is
back in the USSR. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know if you made it to go talk to Mrs. Hofstetler to do house cleaning. Did you hover over the television in her kitchen?
I think I did, but I can't remember what it said.
So it was, the story takes place on April 1st, 1996, which I love because, first of all, that's the year Blair and I met. But more importantly, like, what a great way to throw in nostalgia from the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And so as part of the world building in this, I actually went to like soap opera history pages.
Oh my
and
God.
Found the synopsis of Days of Our Lives from March 30th.
Yes.
And I threw that in there. And you know what? It's like, those are little fun things that I can put in the world. Like, I don't want this to be a dark and dreary game.
Yeah.
The world is dark and dreary enough. And for anybody that's a total Nancy Drew nerd, if you didn't touch the body and you went chasing after this person, all of the pop-up little clues, if you look really carefully, you'll notice that all of them are titled after Nancy Drew games.
Oh my God.
Books.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, or if you go upstairs in the apartment buildings and you overlook the park, it's a reference to Hitchcock's Rear Window.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So, I'm just like throwing in pieces. And listen, when that stuff gets localized and it gets shipped out to other countries, people aren't necessarily going to catch all the pop culture references. And I get that. Pop culture is going to be for the people who have experienced that particular culture in that particular time. But, I want to make a game for people like me. Mm-hmm. And I want to do it with sensitivity and respect. And, I'm sure you notice that when you touch the body, you have that hazy monochromatic thing happening. Mm. You're like, what is this close up of the hand? We don't explain it.
Yeah, no.
Right? And that's very intentional. You see the monochromatic nightmare that she has when she goes to bed. We don't really explain that. We start to throw hints at you, but part of the game is it's the mystery who killed Pardon Albie, but it's also the mystery of Lily. Because unless you've read the book, you don't know why she's reacting the way that she is.
No, and I didn't know it until I was doing research for this interview, and I saw you talking about sexual assault, and I was just like, oh, that's what that was about. Oh. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, like books, there's a lot of times where books have to sort of spell it out for you, don't they? Like in the very beginning of the thing, or they find... They do try and find creative ways to keep it hidden, but like games, you can be completely confused in a game and like not figure out what's going on for like hours.
And
or a whole game.
I don't know if you had a chance to see, like I've given that talk so many different times in so many different formats, but I teach a 1-hour masterclass on the narrative, a visual and audio design of this game. And then I talk about how do you take this linear game with sensitive subject matter and how do you create something that's compelling and not disturbing. And when my husband read the book, because I had long since signed off on buying the rights for it, and a year and a half later, when we finally got into production, he read chapter 5, which is where her trauma is revealed to the reader. And he said, oh my God, what are we going to do about this? And I said, well, we're not gamifying it. Right? We're not showing the assault. We are going to find a sensitive way to talk about it. And we're going to layer that throughout the story in a way that hopefully minimizes the impact on people who have experienced it. I'm a survivor of sexual assault. The previous woman writer that we had working with us was also a survivor. And I know many women for whom it has happened, like at varying degrees from harassment to rape to, it's something that we need to be mindful of, and we need to think about the design of it. Even our art choices for the trigger art evolved from the beginning of the game to where it is now. And we moved away from something that was actually more of a red and black horror look. And so when Anthony, our art director, came by and said, hey, listen, I said it wasn't working for me anymore. He came up with the monochromatic and he really took it to a whole other level. So every choice that we're making as game developers is to be mindful of the reader's experience, of the player's experience, And I think it's going to be exciting for people who are already familiar with the book, because now they get to have the agency piece of it. And if you've listened to the audiobook, then you're going to be super excited, because Julia is the actress who read the audiobook. We got her as the narrator. She's
perfect.
She's Lily. Yeah.
So with all that in mind, why this story in particular?
A couple of reasons. So when we met Charlene, which was the fall of 2014, my God, I can't believe it's been 5 years. We met her at a book writers conference, the world's largest mystery writers conference. And I approached her, and part of the approach was strategic, right? We knew that what we wanted to create was a game engine really well suited to mystery. I was going to say romance, because that's the most popular genre for women readers. We wanted to build something that was well suited for mystery. And who is Charlene's fan base, right? So from a strategy perspective, it's like, find an author that is well known, that has our fan base. And her agent said that they were open to working with us. They had previously done a hidden objects game 10 years prior. And so when I was going through her catalog of what was available, it was a very small portion of what was available, because things were tied up with television rights and et cetera. And so I picked up the Lily Bard book, and I read it, and I went, this is the book that needs to be a game. This is the game that the games industry needs right now. And so when I asked for the rights of that book, it was, gosh, I think we started the negotiations in the middle of 2015, and it took like 7 months for us to go back and forth on the contract, because that's how long things take. And so by the time we even started working on it was a year and a half later. So we started working on it like maybe 4 months before the Me Too movement started. So we had no idea that was going to happen while we were writing this game. But I knew that this was a valuable story that needed to be told. Bottom line, what I loved, like if you go on YouTube and you look for, One More Story Games, there's a fireside chat with Charlene that I interviewed her. And one of the things that has always struck me is her saying, one, every single book signing she's ever done for the last 20 years, there's always somebody that brings a copy of the Lily Bard series with them and says, thank you, because I'm also a survivor. Charlene is a survivor. That's why she wrote it. And the other piece of it is, she says, Lily doesn't need to be rescued. So isn't that refreshing to create a character of a woman that's had that experience, that does not need to be rescued by a man in particular, but that she rescues herself. And so we're very mindful. We're incorporating a lot of more therapy and self-reflection in the game than there ever was in the books, because that's a personal value that I have, that Lily journals, that she talks about a therapist. She doesn't do that in the books, not until book 4 anyways. So.
And it is nice that you can put your own sort of stamp on it as well, like in this, like incorporate your own experiences and making her just so more real.
Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be working on this story. Like I said, I've talked about it worldwide, and I've had people come up to me after talk saying, I'm ready to buy your game. I don't know if I'm ready to play it, because I too am a survivor. And so I get that. I totally understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. So given your strong focus on story and narrative, was there anything in specific that served as a specific sort of influence? I know back in the 90s, LucasArts, they dominated with games like Sam and Max, and you had Day of the Tentacle and Broken Sword and Gabriel Knight were also prominent examples. But unfortunately, they've kind of, I don't know how much of it has died down in the indie scene, but they've died down a bit recently with all the Western RPGs and shooters.
Yeah, when I met Blair back in 1996, did I play games before I met him? Yeah, I did actually. I played console, and I had a Game Boy. I was playing my Game Boy quite a bit.
Love Game Boy.
Right? I've been playing games since I was 8. And then when I met Blair, I started playing these point and click adventure games with him. So
yeah,
we
I did
started
that
off,
too with Daryl. I used to do Skype chat. We would do Skype. What was it? Monkey Treasure Island.
Yeah, and for us, it was a lot of Gabriel Knight. Loved Gabriel Knight and Tex Murphy. And so for those of you not familiar, Tex Murphy is it's a game series. It's about a curmudgeon detective set in the future of San Francisco. I think it's 2050. And, it's got that biting humor, which I love biting humor. It's clever, it's sassy, and I loved it. It's, it used to be super cheesy graphics, and now it's like full motion video. And during this whole thing, right before I guess it was around the time that we raised our money for our company, is I went on this tour. I did 8 cities in 23 days, and I met game developers, writers, screenwriters. I wanted to know, are we building something that's viable? Like, is there any interest here? And on that tour, I specifically reached out to women game devs via Twitter because the guys would not talk to me. They wouldn't give me the time of day. So I thought, well, why bother chasing after people that are going to ignore you? I'm going to go talk to the ladies. And so as a result, that's when I first met Kate Edwards. So 5 years ago, I met Kate Edwards for the first time. And Kate was kind enough to introduce me to other people, and other people were like, well, who do you want to know? I said, do you know who I really would love to meet? I would love to talk to Chris Jones, the guy that created Tex Murphy. And they set it up, and it happened. And so we had a Skype chat with him, and, he eventually actually created a short promo video for us for our failed Kickstarter back in 2016, I guess it was. And those things happen. I mean, yeah, it is what it is. Yeah. But amazing things happen when you use your network, when you grow and nurture your network. And so we've been very blessed. It was like, that's incredible to have loved this game series for, 20 plus years. And then to have one of the creators tell you that he loves what you're doing. And, I would love to work with him in some capacity, maybe take fan art from Tex Murphy, throw it into our game engine as an asset pack, and let fans create their own Tex Murphy adventures. Like, that would be really wild. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of what we're going to be working on in the next couple of years is the asset packs for fans, so that they can create their own games. And, we've had so many amazing experiences like that where, when you were talking about, was it Psychonauts, or what's the other one? Oh my gosh. Tim Schafer sat in on one of the talks that I gave last month in New Zealand. And it was like, it really threw me off, but he wanted to hear us talk about mental health and games. And so I think that if you stay curious, that no matter where you are in your career, if you're at the beginning of your career or, 20, 30 years into your career, there's always something to be learning from other people that are in our industry. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
I just was so jazzed that freaking Michael York was in a Tex Murphy game. I was just like, Daryl, it's Basil. And he was just like, oh, it is. But no, I was all about those kind of games when I was growing up. And
Have you ever played the Nancy Drew series?
No, actually. I had a friend who was really into them, and I didn't get around to playing them, but they looked really cool. But I was more just the point and click type of games.
They would totally be up your alley.
Oh, I should try them.
So Lonnie Manella was the voice of Nancy Drew for 17 games. Wow. And she's the voice of Mrs. Hofstetler.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
And she's like the nicest voiceover actress I've ever met in my life. And, and we've been working closely with Megan Geyser, who created her interactive. There is a pioneer in the games industry where she was trying to create games for girls in the 90s when male investors were like, well, only boys like games.
I know.
And nevertheless, she persisted.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an important theme or statement or motto of our time is nevertheless we persisted. And that's where I see a lot of these women who have stuck it out in games as far as they can, right? Because sometimes it can be a very tough industry. It would be so much easier for us to get our work done in other industries. We choose to stay here and we choose to fight. And I have stories that I could share in a whole other podcast, but yeah.
So do you feel like there really is an opportunity now for games to be pushed even further where they can become more consumable, like audiobooks are now? Like digital comics were a thing. And I remember there was like one on the PSP for Metal Gear Solid, but it never really seemed to take off in relation to video games.
Well, what's interesting is there was a report that just came out maybe a month or two ago that stated that 47% of revenue in games is on mobile. And that's significant. And the reason why that's significant is because developing countries don't have access to, it's not in everybody's budget in a developing country to have a laptop or a console with streaming services, but majority of people do have smartphones, right? So we're seeing this shift towards smartphones and tablet games, which your toxic bro dudes are going to be like, those aren't real games.
I know.
You know what? The games industry, while an artistic medium, is driven by money. And if that's where the money is, then we're going to see more and more investment in there. We've seen some really amazing talent leave their companies to go and start companies specifically geared towards games for women, because it's really ignorant to just say, oh, no, I don't want a piece of the 46% market share of games that are being consumed by women.
Yeah.
Right. What I want to see is I want to see more games aimed towards people with, in moderation, but people with a discerning intellect, right? Like I'm tired of games that dumb down who we are. Like I play match 3 games a couple hours a day because I'm zoning out. And I'm doing a lot of my processing. I'm doing my grieving. I'm doing my business development in my head. I'm maybe watching TV and I'm just, advancing on my levels. But, I also want games that challenge me intellectually. And I want games where I can see that somebody has really cared about the characters, right? We wrote a game. We adapted a novelette a couple of years ago, and we made a game called Danielle's Inferno, which is a Monty Python meets Dante's Divine Comedy. Yeah. So that sets it up right there, right? And we had so much fun adapting that. It went on to win a tied for #1 PC Game of the Year here in Canada. And I've watched streamers play it. And this one streamer, when she finally gets to the 9th level of hell, which is betrayal, you're finally affected by the level of hell that you belong in. And it turns out that she has betrayed somebody important in her life. And the streamer is like just crying buckets and buckets. And the stream audience, because we finally watched it, and they're just like, oh my God, this is the best game you've ever played, because she voiced every single character in the game. And, that really meant something to me, right? Like I said, there are lots of ways to make monies in game. You can go and make casino games. You can go and rip off other popular games, reskin them, and then deploy them out. That's what a lot of people are doing. I want to make games that make people feel something. Yeah. And like bring them to their knees in mercy of like, oh my God, I care so much for this character. It's never going to leave me. Yeah. Or at least there'll be a specter of that character in my heart for a long time. And that's exciting because there are so many great storytellers out there that just don't have the tools. They don't have the means. And what we're trying to do and what other engine developers are trying to do is essentially democratize storytelling in games. And that's why indie games is so important right now.
Yeah, and what a time to do it with how much indie games are not like they're still indie, but it's just there's so much more exposure, I feel like, on indie games at the moment with things like mobile, with things like Steam. Like there's so many opportunities for people to get their voices out there. I just played a game called My Child Lebensborn. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay, so it's basically a story-driven, almost like a Tamagotchi game that's about a child of an enemy soldier in from Nazi Germany. So her dad was a Nazi, essentially. And your character adopts her. And she's like abused in school. Like it starts out okay. Like she goes to school, she has a friend, and you're very poor. Like even though you've adopted this kid, you don't have like much money to even get her like a proper meal. Like you're feeding her like gruel a lot of the times just to make ends meet. And you're also trying to find information on her family because she wants to know about her mom. She wants to know about her family. And then more and more, you get more of the story where you're hearing about like how she's treated at school, how teachers treat her at school, how other kids treat her at school. Her friend betrays, like basically says that she doesn't want to be her friend anymore. And you are the parent, like coping with all of this and watching all of this unfurl. And it's so simple, but it's so effective. And it's actually created by two women as well. It's it's absolutely incredible. Definitely, if you can check it out. It's only like I think, well, over here it's like £3, but it's
I love downloading games and giving developers my money and then never playing the games because I don't have the time.
I know.
And I'm happy to do that because one day our turn will come. And, I love that we're seeing this growth of deep games, serious games, whatever you want to call them. And this idea that we're using games as a vehicle for empathy. I think that's my biggest about the industry are some of these games that are like the antithesis of empathy. I don't mind if there's a game that's completely devoid of human emotion, but when you go for the antithesis of empathy into apathy and violence, and that's where I go, really, like we could do better. And like I said, that's like a whole other conversation that we can have. But, you think about the impact of people who were selling cigarettes back in the 50s going, oh no, cigarettes are completely healthy. I don't know if I necessarily agree that some games are not responsible for violence. I would say that repeated exposure to games that minimize the value of human life can have a negative impact on other people.
Yeah.
And, that's nature, nurture, whole conversations about that. So, if what we're doing in some small part is giving people agency to grow and to create more empathy by sharing their own stories, I think we're all the richer for it, right?
Absolutely.
We're starting to see a movement into self-care gamification, and that's primarily being led by women until there's big money involved. And then I'm sure the guys will come over and try to muscle us out. But hopefully we'll stay firm and say, listen, this is a space that we're well acquainted with. We're well acquainted with this nurturing environment. But I can see when the money starts to really roll in, there'll be, because money talks, right? Yeah. When we start to see more money coming out of empathy games, that's maybe when we'll start to see the industry shift a little bit.
Well, that's all I have time for today. But thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. And I think it's been absolutely incredible to hear your story.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much, Lauren. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of She Plays Games. Thank you so much again to Jean for coming on the show. And if you'd like to learn more about Jean, you can follow her on Twitter at Jean Leggett. Also, if you want more episodes of She Plays Games, please be sure to subscribe and follow me on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube by searching She Plays Games, and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at ShePlaysPodcast. Our next episode will be on Monday, November 25th, and if you want to be on the show or want to nominate someone to come on the show, you can email me at ShePlaysPodcast@gmail.com. See you all again next time on She Plays Games.